I was smoking the third hive when the king's herald rode into our valley, and I did not stop working to listen. The bees did not care about heralds. Neither, as a rule, did I. I had 24 winters behind me and a row of 7 hives that needed me more than any horseman in royal grey, so I kept the bellows moving, slow puffs of cool smoke under the lid, while down the hill, the whole of Thornfell went quiet to hear what the Crown wanted from us this season. Taxes, I assumed. It was usually taxes. It was not taxes. By order and in the name of His Majesty King Halvar of the Iron Territories, the herald called, and his voice carried up the slope clean as a struck bell. All unmated omegas of marriageable age are summoned to present themselves at the high keep before the next full moon, that the king may look upon them and choose. I set the bellows down. I want to be honest about what happened next, because it is the part everyone argues over. I did not plan it. I did not stand on a barrel and make a speech. I simply heard the words that the king may look upon them and choose. The way a man chooses a ewe at market, and something in me that had spent 4 years being sensible came loose all at once. I laughed. Not a polite laugh, the real kind, the kind that bends you, that you cannot call back once it is out in the open air. It rolled down the hill into the silent square, and I heard it land in that silence like a stone through ice. Every face in Thornfell turned up the hill to find it. And there, on a black horse at the edge of the square, still as cut stone, was the king himself. I had never seen him before. I knew him the way you know weather is coming, by how everything around him changed. The herald had gone the colour of tallow. The village elders had folded down into bows. Even the horse seemed to be apologising. And in the middle of all that fear sat a man who did not move at all, broad through the shoulder, dark hair pushed back, a face built for refusing things. He was looking up the hill, at me. I stopped laughing. I would like to tell you I held his eyes in noble defiance. What I actually did was pick the bellows back up and pretend to be very busy with a hive that did not need me, which is the village equivalent of putting your hands over your own eyes and trusting it works in both directions. It does not work in both directions. I learnt that at dawn. Someone reported it. Of course, someone reported it. In a valley that size, a laugh travels faster than a fever, and by nightfall I had 3 separate neighbours arrive to tell me, in tones of great enjoyment, that I had insulted the crown and would likely be hanged, and could they have my hives? I did not sleep much. I told myself it was the heat. At first grey light I heard my gate. Not the latch. My gate has no latch worth the name, and neither does my door. The catch broke 2 winters past and I had never fixed it, because there was nothing in my cottage worth a thief's trouble but honey, and the bees guard that better than iron could. So I heard my gate swing, and I thought, guards, and I stood up with my heart going like a startled bird, and I opened my door to meet them on my own feet. There were no guards. There was a wolf. He was enormous, grey shot through with black, sitting square in the middle of my yard as though he had an appointment, and around him, arranged with terrible care, was everything I owned that lived outdoors. My overturned smoking can, set upright. My scattered kindling, gathered into a neat stack. My second best bellows, which I had left in the long grass a week ago and given up for lost, laid across my doorstep like an offering at a shrine. The wolf looked at me. Then he looked, very deliberately, at the bellows. Then back at me. No, I said. Behind the wolf, by my broken gate, stood the king of the Iron Territories with the expression of a man who had been brought somewhere against his will, by a part of himself he could not govern. It is not, he stopped. His jaw did the work his mouth would not. He does this. I do not instruct him to do this. You walked here, I said, from the keep, At dawn, I followed him. A pause that cost him something. He would not be left. The wolf, hearing himself discussed, rose and crossed my yard and lay down across my threshold with his back against my shins, so that to go back inside, I would have had to climb over the personal wolf of the man who could have me hanged. I have thought a great deal, since, about that morning, about how a king who had ridden into my valley to be feared, stood in my broken gateway, looking faintly ill, while his wolf rearranged my woodpile. About how he did not order me to do anything. He just watched the animal betray him, and watched me watch it, and the silence stretched, until it nearly snapped. I laughed at your decree, I said, because someone had to say the true thing. Yesterday, in the square, that was me. I know. His eyes came up. They were not the eyes of a man counting ewes at market. It was the only honest sound I heard all day. Then he turned and walked back down the hill, and the wolf went with him, and I stood in my doorway, holding a bellows I had thought lost, and I understood nothing at all. I would like to tell you I let it go, but you do not get to be the woman who laughed at the king and then simply returned to your bees. The valley would not allow it, and as it turned out, neither would the keep. The summons came 2 days later, and it did not invite me to present myself for the king's choosing. It commanded me to appear before the High Court to answer for words spoken against the crown. That was Lady Ingrid's work. I did not know her name yet, but I would learn it. They sent a cart. I rode it the half day to the keep with my chin up and my hands folded over a kerchief of honeycomb, because if I was going to be tried for laughing, I was at least going to bring a witness something sweet. The keep rose out of the pines like a fist, grey stone, iron-banded doors thrown wide. A great hall that swallowed sound. The court was assembled to watch a beekeeper be made an example of. At the head of the hall sat the king on a chair of black wood, and to his right, half a step nearer the throne than anyone should have been allowed to stand, was a woman of perhaps 50 winters with a face like a closed ledger. Lady Ingrid, the king's aunt, regent through all his boyhood, and, I would come to see, a woman who had never quite handed the kingdom back. This is the creature, she said, before I had fully crossed the threshold, who mocked your law before your own people. I would remind the court that a king whose decrees are laughed at in market squares is a king whose enemies are taking notes. It was very neatly done. She did not accuse me. She accused him, threw me, and dressed it as defence. Speak, Lady Ingrid told me. Explain your insolence. I looked at the king. He had not moved. His jaw was iron again, the way it had been in the square, the way I was beginning to understand meant something other than anger. And I thought, odd, in that moment, that I had never once heard him say the words of his own decree. The herald had said them. Lady Ingrid said your law, your decree, as though pressing a deed into his hands. I laughed, I said, because the decree was absurd. A sound went through the court like wind through wheat. And what, said Lady Ingrid, delighted, is absurd about a king taking a mate? Nothing. I unfolded my kerchief and set the comb on the rail, just to have somewhere to put my hands. A king taking a mate is the most natural thing in the world. It was the looking upon them, and choosing I laughed at. As though a man could line up 40 frightened women and know, by the looking, which one he could not live without. My bees choose their queen better than that. And they are bees. The hall had gone very quiet. You'd want to know her, I said, more to the king now than to the court, because he had finally looked up, not look at her, know her. And you cannot do that in a ceremony. So I laughed. I'm sorry it carried. For a long moment no one spoke. Then the king stood, and the whole court flinched toward the floor, and he said, "The charge is dismissed. She insulted nothing of mine." He looked at his aunt when he said it. Nothing I made. Nothing I made. I turned the words over all the way home in the cart. They sat wrong, the way a step sits wrong when there is one fewer stair than your feet expect. Nothing I made. He had not written the decree. I told myself it was not my concern, and then I did not stop thinking about it for a week, which is the whole of my character laid bare for you. They did not let me go home, not really. A place was found for me at the keep. To answer further questions, Lady Ingrid said, though no one asked me any, in a stone room near the kitchens, and I was given the run of the lower keep, and I told myself I stayed for the work. Because the keep's old gardener had let the herb beds go to ruin, and someone with hands had to save the bee balm before frost. That was a lie. I stayed because of the wolf. He found me on the first day. I was kneeling in the ruined herb bed when he came around the wall and dropped, at my feet, a silver comb set with garnets, clearly costly, clearly someone's, and sat back, pleased with himself. That is not yours, I told him, and it is certainly not mine. It was, I learned within the hour, the betrothal gift Lady Ingrid had ordered, presented to a noble's daughter named Dagny, who had been brought to the keep to be the sensible choice. The choosing the decree had been built to deliver. The wolf had taken it off the gift table in the middle of the great hall, in front of the full court, and carried it the length of the keep to give to the woman repotting bee balm in the dirt. Dagny did not find this amusing. I would learn that too. But it was the king's face that stayed with me. He came striding after the wolf, mortified, and found the animal sitting at my knee with garnets in the grass between us, and he stopped. And for one unguarded breath I watched the king of the Iron Territories look at his own wolf the way you look at a friend who has just said aloud the thing you have spent years not saying. He keeps doing this, he said. Bringing women jewels? Bringing you things. He crouched and gathered the comb, and his hands were not quite steady, and I noticed because noticing is the only weapon I have ever been good with. I will have it returned. I apologize. He does not. He was never like this. With anyone. With anyone, I repeated. No, he stood. The wolf leaned his whole weight against my side, warm as a hearth, and the king looked at the place where the animal touched me as though it were happening to his own body, which, I was beginning to suspect, it was. After that, I stopped pretending the wolf was the strange one. The king began to find reasons to be where I was. They were terrible reasons. He inspected the herb beds, a thing no king has done in the history of kings. He asked me about honey with the grave focus of a man receiving battle reports. He sent his second, a broad, good, humoured warrior named Edric, to make certain the beekeeper has what she needs, and Edric arrived with an entire cart of supplies and the expression of a man enjoying himself enormously at his king's expense. He's never like this, Edric told me cheerfully, unloading clay pots I had not asked for. You should have seen him try to mention you at council, got halfway through your name, and pretended to choke on his wine. The whole table watched their king invent a cough. You're enjoying this, I said. Madam, I have served that man through 2 wars and a winter siege, and I have never once seen him lose. I am enjoying it more than I can decently say. I laughed. It carried. Again, and from down the corridor I heard a door that had been closing stop closing, and stay open, and I did not let myself look to see whose hand was on it. I should tell you, before we go further, because what comes next is the night I stopped being able to lie to myself, that if a man losing every argument with a beekeeper is the sort of thing you would like more of, this channel is full of it. Subscribe and stay close. That is the only time I will ask. Now, the gallery, and the dark, and the question I should not have put to a king. The vulnerable part came on a night I did not plan for, which is how the true things always seem to arrive. I had taken to walking the upper gallery after dark, where the keep's narrow windows looked out over the black pines and a person could breathe. I thought I was alone. I was not. The king stood at the far window with a cup of something untouched in his hand, looking at nothing, and when he heard me, he did not send me away. "You said I did not make the decree," I said, "because the gallery was dark, and dark makes me brave." In the court. "You said nothing I made." His hand moved on the cup. He set it down on the sill, too carefully, the way he had set nothing down all the times I had watched him. "You notice everything. It is a failing. Did you write it?" A long silence. Below us an owl crossed the courtyard. "My father died when I was 9, he said, which was not an answer, and was the whole answer. My aunt held the territories until I came of age. She held them well. I will not pretend otherwise. But a regent who rules for 11 years does not simply set the kingdom down when the boy turns into a man. She has spent the years since finding ways to keep her hands on it. The decree was the latest, a mass choosing, a sensible bride of her selection, a Luna who would owe her place to my aunt and not to me. I refused it for a season. She brought it to council without me. By the time I learned of it, the heralds had ridden. You could have called them back. I could have. He turned. In the dark, I could only see the shape of him, but I have never needed light to hear a man's voice change, and every lord in the Iron Territories would have learnt that the king cannot govern his own court. That is how thrones are lost. So I let the decree stand, and I told myself I would refuse the bride when the choosing came, and I would find some way to make the refusal look like strength. A breath. And then a beekeeper laughed at it in a market square and said aloud the thing I had not let myself say in council. And I rode to her gate at dawn because my wolf would not let me do anything else. The gallery was very cold, and I did not feel it. "Why are you telling me this?" I said. "Because you asked." He almost smiled. I heard it more than saw it. And because no one has asked me a true question in 11 years. They ask me what I command. They do not ask me what I want. "What do you want?" He did not answer that one. But he did not leave, either, and we stood at our separate windows in the dark while the owl hunted below, and the silence between us was not empty. It was the fullest thing I had ever stood inside of. That, I thought walking back to my room, was a more dangerous gift than any garnet comb. Lady Ingrid was not a woman to lose a kingdom to a beekeeper without a fight. She moved fast. Within 3 days, the word through the keep was that the king's choosing would not wait for the full moon after all, that a binding betrothal between His Majesty and Lady Dagny would be sealed at the next council, by the old rite, witnessed and blood sworn, the kind that cannot be set aside once spoken. She had stopped trying to deliver a bride. She was going to nail one in place before the king could refuse, and use the rite itself as the lock. I knew it was aimed at me. So did everyone. Dagny made certain I knew. She found me in the herb garden the morning before the council, lovely and cold, and she did not raise her voice. "You amuse him," she said. "A man like that, raised to iron, with a clever, ragged little thing who says forbidden things in his halls. I understand it, but amusement is not a Luna. By tomorrow night I will be blood sworn to the throne, and you will be a story he tells, if he tells it kindly. Go back to your bees. It is gentler than watching. It was, I will grant her, well aimed." I went back to my bees, but on the way I passed the great hall where they were preparing the rite, and I saw the iron doors standing open, and I saw the wolf lying across the threshold of them, with his head on his paws, refusing to let them close, and a steward trying to shoo him. And failing. And I stopped being frightened, and started being angry, which is a far more useful feeling. That night I did not walk the gallery. I went to the king's own door, which no beekeeper has any business doing, and I knocked, and Edric opened it with his eyebrows halfway up his forehead. "She is going to bind you tomorrow," I told the king over Edric's shoulder, by a right you cannot break. Your aunt. Tomorrow, at the council. They have moved it forward. He was on his feet. How do you know this? Because Dagny told me to go home before I had to watch. I made myself meet his eyes. I am not telling you so you'll choose me. I am telling you because you said no one asks you what you want, and I think someone should make very sure you are allowed to answer before they swear it out of you in blood. That is all. You can marry whom you like. But you should do it with your own mouth. For a moment he only looked at me. Why does it cost you anything, he said quietly, to come here and say this? Because if I am wrong about you, I said, I would rather know tonight than spend the rest of my life keeping bees and wondering. The wolf, who had followed me up, lay down across his king's threshold so that the door could not be shut on me, and the king looked down at the animal and then at me, and something in his iron face gave way like a frozen river in spring. Then tomorrow, he said, watch what I do, and do not laugh until I tell you it is funny. The council hall the next day was full to its grey walls. Every lord of the Iron Territories had been summoned to witness the binding. Lady Ingrid had arranged it like a master, Dagny in pale gold at the dies. The old priest with the blood bowl, the right words written on calfskin, the king in his place looking. To anyone who did not know the set of his jaw, perfectly resigned. I stood at the very back where a beekeeper belonged, between two columns, and I made myself small. Lady Ingrid rose to speak the opening of the rite. We gather to bind the king to his chosen. I have not chosen. The king's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It fell across the hall, and every other sound died under it. Lady Ingrid's smile did not move, which is how I knew she was afraid. Your Majesty, the decree I did not write. He stood, spoken in my name, by my heralds, without my hand. I let it stand because I believed a king who could not master his own counsel would lose his crown. I was wrong. A king who lets others speak his vows in blood has already lost it. He turned from her to the assembled lords, and I watched the proudest man in the territories do the thing his pride had been built to prevent. I tell you plainly, before all of you, that for 11 years I have been ruled in private by the woman who raised me, and that I am ending it today, in public, at whatever cost. Judge me weak for saying so. I would rather be a king who can be laughed at than one who can be steered. The hall erupted. Lady Ingrid's voice cut through it. Seize the beekeeper. She has poisoned the king's mind. Take her from the hall. And 2 of her men moved toward my columns, and that was the move that nearly worked. Because in the noise and the crush, no one was watching the back of the hall, and a woman dragged out in the chaos can be made to vanish before order returns. I gripped the iron rail of the gallery rail so hard, the cold of it bit into my palm, and broke the skin. And I did not let go, and I did not let them make me small. He did not choose me either, I called out, and my voice, bless it, came out steadier than I felt, and carried the way it always carries. Hear me. The king has chosen nothing. He has only refused to be chosen for. That is not weakness. Any one of you who has ever been handed a life and called it a gift knows the difference. And into the silence that followed, the wolf walked. He came the length of the council hall, unhurried, past the lords and the priest and the blood bowl and pale gold Dagny, and he did not bow to the king, and he did not bow to the regent. He crossed to the back of the hall, to the ragged beekeeper, bleeding from one hand against the rail, and he lay down at my feet and put his great head against my knee. And he looked up at the whole assembled court of the Iron Territories, as if to say there, now you know. I have been telling you for weeks. The king came down from the dais. He crossed the hall on his own 2 feet, past everyone who outranked me, and he stopped in front of me. And he went down, not in a bow. A king does not bow. But he brought himself level. on one knee, so that his eyes were under mine for the first time since a market square. "My wolf knew you," he said, before I had the sense to. "He has been trying to give you everything I own for a month, and I have been apologizing for him because I was too proud to admit he was right." He took my bleeding hand, the one that had gripped the iron, and turned it palm up between both of his. "Forgive him the comb. Forgive me the decree. I cannot offer you a choosing. I can only ask, with my own mouth, the way you said it should be done, will you let me know you? The rest of my life. As long as that is. I have been asked since what I felt at that moment, and the truth is unromantic. I felt the cut in my palm, and the warmth of his hands around it, and a great roaring in my ears that I realized after a moment was the entire court of the Iron Territories trying to decide whether to be scandalized. "You'll have to fix my door first," I said. "The latch is broken. It has been broken for 2 years. If I am going to be a Luna, I will not have a door that does not catch." The thing his face had been trying not to do, all those weeks, it finally did it. He laughed. It carried. When he kissed me, it was not the gift. The gift was what broke open behind it. The 11 locked years and the cold gallery and the dawn at my gate all coming undone at once, and I understood that I had not been chosen at all. I had been recognized. There is a difference. I had told a whole court there was. Lady Ingrid did not vanish in a puff of smoke. Villains rarely do. They curdle slowly, in front of everyone. Stripped of her regent's seat by the king's own word, before witnesses, she was given a choice the rest of the court found very gentle, and she found unbearable. A quiet estate in the far west, an honourable income, and no voice. She took it because the alternative was a public trial for swearing a blood right in a king's name without his hand, which is its own kind of treason. She left within the month. Dagny, to her credit, left faster and married a kinder man inside the year, and sent us, eventually, a stiff but genuine letter of thanks for the comb she never had to wear. The fracture was real. For a season there were lords who muttered that a king who could be laughed at could be challenged, and one who tried, and lost, the way you lose to a man who has finally stopped being steered. The keep learned the new shape of things slowly. So did I. But this is where the warmth lives, so let me end there. 6 months on, it was full summer, and I had my hives in the keep's south garden, 7 of them, then 9. The valley's bees, brought up the hill in straw skeps by neighbours who now claimed they had always known I was destined for greatness, and could they visit the keep. The herb beds had come back riotous. Edric had taken to stealing honeycomb from the kitchens and blaming the wolf, who accepted the blame with great dignity, because it usually got him more honeycomb. And my door catches. He fixed it himself, the first week, with his own hands, and a great deal more cursing than the task required, a king of the Iron Territories on his knees, in a doorway fitting a latch, while his Luna held the lamp, and offered unhelpful advice. It catches now, clean, every time, which means that every evening, when he comes to find me, and he always comes to find me, he has to take the latch in his hand and lift it deliberately to come in. He could leave it open. I have told him he may leave it open. He never does. He likes, he says, to lift the latch each time, to choose the door every evening with his own hand, to be a man who is let in rather than a king who simply enters. The wolf, of course, does not bother with the latch. The wolf goes through the kitchen window like a scandal. Some things you cannot teach an animal who knew the truth before any of us did. So that is the whole of it. The laugh that carried, the gate at dawn, the comb in the grass, the door that finally catches. I still do not know how a sound I could not call back turned into a life I would not give up. But I am curious about you. Did you see it coming, that the decree was never his? that the laughing woman and the silent king wanted the very same thing? Or did it sneak up on you, the way it snuck up on me? Tell me in the comments, and tell me where you are listening from tonight, because I like to imagine the map of all of you out there in the dark. If this story warmed something in you, stay with me, subscribe, and I will tell you another one. There is always another one. The Iron Territories are full of doors that have not learnt to catch yet. Until then, mind your bees, and do not be afraid to laugh where it carries.